Hello, my name is Allison Wright. Thank you for viewing my thesis, The Future of Open Source Project Collaboration, Creating a Strategy for Volunteer Retention in Open Source Project Development. Initial research questions. How do we retain volunteers in open source? What incentive do people have to participate in open source if they're not being paid? What does the current state of open source participation look like in the community? As I began to study open source and interview participants in the community, I realized this area of study covered a wide breadth of interdisciplinary topics and was deeply entangled with culture, politics, activisms, and policies. It was difficult to stay within a narrow focus area with all of the research I had accumulated. I also found that there was a lack of unifying theories among scholars trying to understand open source communities, a lack of people to talk about their current open source projects, and an inability to identify a community of practice in the Philadelphia area. The result was an overwhelming amount of information that was difficult to make heads or tails of and address with a possible design solution. What I came to realize was that what I initially thought was a tangled, disconnected mess was actually a great strength of the open source community. And I learned that this is called a decentralized network structure. The benefits of open source being a decentralized network structure means that the community members can subvert systems created under neoliberalist policies that restrict product development growth, i.e., what we see in overbearing patent laws regarding medical equipment. It prevents a whole system failure if it continues to function, even if one part is inactive or removed. It solves issues related to trust in terms of sharing information and authority. It also supports peer-to-peer communication by eliminating external censorship. For me, as a researcher, trying to research and understand a decentralized network was a bit of a struggle. It made it very difficult to research because of a constantly shifting landscape of people, projects, and community. A lack of standardization in terms of terminology, practices, and documentation meant that understanding one community and then moving to another community wasn't fluent, and it was difficult to get a bird's eye view or a larger picture of the open source community from one single source. After coming to this realization, I refined my research questions. My refined questions are, how do we gather people in a single space long enough to analyze their collaboration methods? How do we continue to support and encourage intangible value for open source participants? And how do we provide a structure to help capture necessary documentation for open source publication? My realization that any attempt to create a solution would have to come from multiple angles of entry to capture the interests of people who are coming into the community with different backgrounds. The main objectives of each artifact that I established are based on the core principles below. To initiate interest in open source, to educate on values and terminology, and to integrate or to invite people to come and participate in the open source community. Based on my research, I realized that my artifacts needed to address the core issues of identity creation, team collaboration, knowledge and social networks, and community building as the main areas which I identified as needing strengthening through my research. The Openverse is a speculative design space designed as a boundary object for helping to study and understand interactions amongst open source participants. The Openverse currently utilizes the social meeting platform Gather Meeting. Gather Meeting allows teams to come together in a virtual co-working space for meetings and conferences. Ultimately, I would want the Openverse to function on its own independent open access platform, but for this project, I chose Gather Meeting because it provides a functioning model I could easily adapt to create the Openverse. I chose this platform for several key reasons. 1. The ability to customize both the characters and the spaces, which allows for the expression of individual identity. 2. The ease and simplicity of functionality, which means that interdisciplinary teams with or without tech experience can easily jump in and participate in open group collaboration. And 3. The platform is built around the ability to connect with external tools such as Zoom, Miro, and Google Teams, which means that each team can retain their own collaboration tools without a need for everyone to come to one standardization process. The Openverse is scaffolded around several key buildings that our research shows to provide important functions to open source communities, and these buildings can be found on the designated town map. Otherwise, the Openverse is designed by the participants of the community, and as projects come and go, the community map changes to suit the needs of its members. In order to engage participants, I created 2 categories of engagement objects to initiate interest in entering the Openverse. The first is the zine. It initiates interest in the Openverse through a simple, recognizable, and easy-to-use tool, a book. It educates and introduces key words and concepts through a fictional narrative, and it integrates and invites people to participate by asking readers to continue their journey when they finished reading by checking out the YouTube tutorials. The second group of artifacts I created were YouTube tutorials that initiate interest in the Openverse by using eye-catching colors, music, and cues to narrate the story. I educate on values and terminology by showing viewers and people activities happening in the Openverse. And I integrate invite to participate by creating a sense of curiosity that prompts viewers to continue their journey into the Openverse. What you're going to view today is a summary or an overview of the artifacts in a consolidated format for viewing during our brief time for this thesis. If you're curious about any of the full formats of the artifacts, I have zines available for viewing. All of the videos are available on my YouTube channel. Following the viewing of the artifacts, I'll give a brief overview of the creative process and take any additional questions. Enjoy!
Are you looking for a community that values transparency, collaboration, and inclusivity? Yeah. Do you find value in sharing your knowledge and building a vast social network? I sure do. Is your research being limited by systemic barriers that prevent you from accessing the resources you need? Yeah. Do you want to fight proprietary pirates? Heck yeah. Then you need to come to the Openverse. Are you ready? Let's go!
One of the most important components of the Openverse is our social network bank. Social networks create value for members of our community by allowing them to connect, learn, and grow their open source projects together. This social network bank gives you the opportunity to grow your network by capturing social interactions during real-time conversations. For example, when you attend a conference or class, this means that you no longer have to worry about exchanging contact information because we do it for you via our social network bank. Let's see an example of how it works. The Library and Archive Retrieval System, or LARS, is a functionality that supports a search for projects and external open source repositories. LARS is a designated space in the Openverse where any member of the community can come to search external open source repositories to assist in the development of their own project. Here's how it works. If an open source repository has an existing API connection, LARS can facilitate that connection by using an API key to connect the Openverse search function with the repositories. A good example is the Open Source Hardware Association API search function. LARS is supported by trained moderators who will meet with a member to determine the parameters for their research. Let's watch an example of an Openverse member utilizing the LARS system. The open source community member needs information related to existing open source wheelchair modification systems. They find the LARS building on the town map and come in to meet with the moderator. They tell the moderator what search criteria they need, and the moderator takes care of the rest. The LARS moderator will enter the search criteria, connect using the API key, and retrieve the project information and necessary access links. The information will be emailed via the intranet to the team for review. Teams can request a LARS session once every 30 days. And me, the narrator. That means both my world, the normal verse, and your world, the open verse, come together. The hybrid makerspace model is a speculative design solution that supports the collaboration of open source teams. The hybrid makerspace model emphasizes the use of existing technology to bring together members who are in the physical makerspace with members who have a virtual presence as well. The model is open, simple, and can be adapted to any current makerspace or fab lab. The hosting platform is GatherTown, the model currently in use for collaboration in the Openverse. GatherTown is a user-friendly platform that allows for virtual meetings to occur in business and conference settings. By adapting the functionality of GatherTown with cross-platform tools like Zoom, open hardware teams utilizing makerspaces meeting sites can come together without the restrictions traditionally imposed by geographic borders. Here's how it works. Python script, combined with the custom mapping feature of GatherTown, will allow in-person participants to move around the physical makerspace and the openverse in real time. It will allow virtual members to track and interact with in-person participants in the same space. Physical makers will download the Python package via an app on their mobile device and laptop. Once paired, the phone can detect motion, report the motion back to the laptop, and the virtual avatar will sync in real time, allowing virtual participants to see who is in the makerspace and where they're standing. Virtual participants only need to move their avatar to the desired machine to engage with a working participant. Each workstation in the physical makerspace will include a camera that allows for both virtual and physically present participants to interact. Cameras placed above the machine will allow virtual makers to see and engage in the making process. Cameras located next to each machine will allow participants to engage and support each other throughout the making process. Members can exchange knowledge and expertise, facilitating value exchange for both parties. Let's see an example of how this works. The Design for Tomorrow Lab is making a wheelchair modification for a child in South America. They have a base template, but they need to adjust the wheelchair to accommodate the child's physical stature. The team members are split between Drexel, South America, and Canada. The goal is to send a cardboard prototype before cutting the final material. Alyssa and Maria are on the same team. Alyssa is in the Drexel makerspace, and Maria is at her home lab in Panama, but doesn't have access to a makerspace. Maria is a master laser cutter craftswoman. Alyssa has some working knowledge of using the laser cutter, but is not an expert. She needs help lining up the material to be cut, which is something she hasn't done before. When Maria is ready to assist Alyssa, she can do so by approaching her avatar and walking over to the laser cutting machine. Maria will appear on the screen in front of Alyssa and begin providing instructions. Alyssa can see and hear Maria's instructions on the interactive screen placed at her machine. When the cutting is complete, Alyssa can use the 360 room camera to connect with Maria to help with the assembly phase. Maria can continue to support Alyssa by moving her avatar to the space designated for collaboration. Maria is providing a scaffolding learning experience by supporting Alyssa through verbal instructions while allowing Alyssa to learn a new skill through interactive body moving. Maria gains confidence through her ability to support her team in the development process. Both are working towards the team goal of creating a prototype of assembling a chair. This is just one example of how interactive technology can be integrated into any existing makerspace to support team collaboration.